all kids are smart. They'll have strengths and weaknesses. And honestly, the true geniuses out there, like the true geniuses, oftentimes they have struggles at fitting in with others because they're in a world that they don't relate to.
Their brain just works so much differently from everyone else's.
Sure. Yeah.
Hello. When Jack graced us with his presence in this world, what do you think was the thing that you were focused on? Like, were you focused on building a genius, or were you just focused on putting a diaper on correctly?
I want him to be the best and the smartest and the fastest and the coolest and the best. Of course. I mean, I think everyone selfishly does for their child, and I think that goes into why people are like, oh, Jimmy's in the gifted pro. Oh, Timmy did. Oh, I'm so, maybe we'll see on the field trip. I think it's definitely like a hierarchy when you become parents of like,
because it's a reflection of you, kind of.
Yes. Like who's got their spots first. But, no, I just wanted him to be healthy and happy. And I was also trying to navigate all my postpartum crap, which is the reason why we started a podcast. And that's the reason why you need to call Heather before the baby comes out.
That's right.
That's right.
So we have an expert here today who is going to talk us through some things that we can do with our children to make sure that we are developing their brains properly or giving them the best educational learning experience. Heather, thank you so much for being here. How did you get started in this field? Tell us a little bit about your personal and professional background.
And like when people say, what do you do? Like, what do you do?
Yeah. Okay, sure. Well, it's so nice to be here. Thank you for having me. Yeah, it's a long story. I'll try to keep the modified version. Obviously, I have 4 kids, and some of my kids had learning challenges. But what do I do?
You have a set of twins as well.
Yes, twins in there. And
it's boy, girl, twin boys?
Yes, that's correct. So what do I do? Right now, I teach moms how to give their babies the best start by teaching them how to stimulate their baby's brain in all the ways that their baby needs, so they can develop to be their best selves. Because in my work working with children with learning challenges, I saw so many gaps and basically gaps in their physical development that just astounded me, that made me realize, wow, we're not giving our babies what they need. I want to share this, and it's not being talked about. So that's
that's one of the things you've put online. You're like, this isn't Googleable. This isn't
not
in
really,
the books.
no,
This is so new and innovative, but it's crazy because you said there are physical things that you are seeing.
Sure.
And what are those things?
Yes, good question. Okay, so I want to explain something. When babies are born, they're born with a set of primitive reflexes, and some are already developed in utero and developed for the next 3 years. So what is a primitive reflex? When I say that, that's not necessarily a regular term. And when I first heard about it, I couldn't really absorb what it was. So I'll give you some examples. And of course, you've heard of some of them because babies have a strong sucking reflex. Mm-hmm. And reflex means they can't help it. You tickle their cheek and they look. That is a reflexive movement. They cannot stop it. So they do it without thinking. It's the same with the palmar, the hand reflex. If you put the finger in the baby's hand and put pressure there, they'll squeeze it tight. Mm-hmm. It's not because they want to, it's a reflex. So throughout that whole year, even up to age 3, there are reflexes that appear. The interesting thing is, though, firstly, for the system to mature, that is the brain and the nervous system, those primitive reflexes need to be used and used a lot. And then they integrate in the brain. And the brain matures. It's sort of like a sequential hierarchy. And even the nervous system matures and calms. And there's so many processes going on. The balance system, vision, on and on. So, for example, I can give a classic example of a reflex that you may not be aware of. The short form is called the ATNR. So when a baby looks to the side, and this can be a newborn, and you know how babies are kind of like, they're jiggly and they're moving like this. So if they look like this arm will come up and this arm will extend. And it won't be immediate. It'll be slow, but it'll happen. And one leg will come up and one will
So they
extend.
make like a Nike check with their hand.
Yeah. The nickname is the fencer. The fencer.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Yeah. So even a newborn does that. You know, I've got the cutest little picture of that. So think about if we prevent movement, you're preventing what the body and brain needs to do. So that's my biggest message is movement grows the brain.
So don't swaddle.
That's
hate
one of my
swaddling.
messages. Yes, that is one of my
Really?
Which is crazy because everyone's like, swaddle, it's the way of mankind. The cavemen did it. Blah, blah, blah.
I know. And babies, you know, newborns are amazing sleepers, right? Like newborns sleep.
Yeah,
I'm talking
they're
newborn
potatoes.
stage. Yeah. So
Yeah,
we
but
don't
just
really
not when
have
you
to
want them
swaddle.
to.
Not when you want them to. Yes,
No,
all day.
this is true.
Yeah, yeah.
It's all about them, not us, when they're newborns. And I understand swaddling seems, you know, comforting and safe. And there is a sense of that, of course. So if you swaddle your baby for a few weeks, is it going to hurt them? Probably not. I personally, though, wouldn't swaddle at all because I know that they don't need it. Do you see what I mean? And movement is so much more important.
That is crazy because I
But
feel like
that's my
most
opinion.
people get hung up on the milestones. Like, oh, is Asher talking? Is Asher walking? How many
Right.
words does Asher have?
Right.
Is Asher, when did he crawl? When did he sit up? So it's those milestones that people, not I know people get so hyper fixated on.
Sure.
I saw a mom in the pediatrician's office and she's like, I was like, oh, he's so sweet. She's like, he just started sitting up on his own and he's almost 8 months. I was like, it's fine. Like, it's okay. Like, I think that's like a social media thing though.
Case, were you big with milestones with Jack?
Jack hit a lot of milestones early. Like he hit a lot early. Some were, you know, he got teeth at 6 months. He sat up at 6 months. He started crawling a little bit after that. He started walking around 10 months. You know, like he was early on some things. He doesn't shut up. I mean, he has so many words. You say something and he parrots it. He hasn't done curse words yet. I really need to clean it up. But I guess, Heather, what are the differences between the milestones and
movement?
The movements or the,
Right.
You said reflexes.
Yeah, no. So reflexes totally are completely integrated with milestones because you probably didn't realize it, but before your baby crawled, when they were pushing themselves up or even getting in the crawling position, they rock. And that rocking, that's a primitive reflex. And so some babies don't crawl at all. Maybe they're not given the supportive environment, which my course goes into, of course, because we just don't realize necessarily. Some moms don't, right? Or we also can rely on containers a lot. And I understand that. I had twins, so I had them in the bouncy seat a lot. If I was to do it differently now, I say keep your container use to minimal. And
how do you feel about, we call it Thunderdomes. How do you feel about like playpens, big playpens?
So the difference is in a playpen, you have free movement. So I like playpens. I think that's a great way to go have your shower and put your baby in the
put your baby in the pack and play over the bouncy seat.
Totally. In a bouncy seat, they're kind of like this, and there's no free movement. So the chance of them moving their head up and down or side to side or arms out, it's not happening.
Can you do physical therapy if they're not doing the fencer pose? Do you make them do the fencer pose, or what do you do to facilitate the reflexes?
Okay, good question again. And it depends on the age. But firstly, you just need to provide the environment for them to get lots and lots of free movement. And when your baby is born, your doctor tests them for at least one reflex because they know if that baby doesn't have a natural reflex, there's something wrong with the brain. It's that simple. But after that, they don't worry about it because we know that it's all part of the maturing process and they'll develop that way and should develop all their primitive reflexes. But the key is they do develop them, but they don't always disappear. And when we say disappear, what it really means is mature and integrate in the brain. So for example, if the baby doesn't get enough free movement in that first year, that ATNR reflex might still be active in their system. So then they're going to go to school, and every time they turn their head, or this can happen with certain people when they drive, you got your steering wheel, you turn your head to look, and your arms move because you're still reflexing. Now, it's not a strong reflex, but it can be very mild or medium.
Maybe this is why my tennis game isn't improving.
One thing, though, that I'm thinking of, Jack had the magic Merlin suit, and we kept him in it too long, and it keeps their arms out. So they're kind of starfish. And after we took him out of it, he would walk around. I don't know if you could see me with his arms out. We called him Jesus Christ Superstar because he would walk around Like he was Jesus on the cross just all the time. Like we would be holding him.
Yeah.
And I'm like, maybe that was a little too long for muscle memory. So is that, can you do too much?
Well, in terms of
or too much restricting?
Yes, it's a different kind of restriction, isn't it? And you're right. It was probably muscle memory and the muscles were growing like that.
Yeah.
I can't speak to that 100% to know why, right? But I wanted to give another example.
He just is the second coming of Christ. I mean, that's also an option.
That's usually what mothers think of their sons. Heather, you have plenty of sons, so you know.
Yeah, totally. So the CDC has taken crawling off the milestone list. I don't know if you've heard that.
That was recent. That was in like the last year, right?
Yes, because the theory from other professionals I've talked to is that because maybe it could have been during COVID or just in general, a lot of babies aren't crawling. So rather than, call that a red flag or get parents all concerned, now they've decided, let's just take it off the list. But crawling is actually an amazing stage for the brain maturing. It just is, because it's the first movement that your baby will do that isn't reflex oriented. It's because they want to. And so their body, it's bilateral. So they're coordinating one arm with one leg, right? Because you're doing this. And it engages the core in an unbelievable way. Like if you try crawling for 20 minutes, you'd feel it. So there's fantastic things going on in the brain and the vision and balance. And crawling is one of my favorite stages. So I say, let them crawl and crawl a lot and become amazing crawlers, crawl up and down stairs, obviously with supervision, etc. So, yeah.
What about crawling, but not really? Because that's what my son's doing. He's got this mountain climber thing going on.
Yeah.
He's 14 months and he refuses to put his knees down.
Right.
So he almost like looks like a gorilla going
He's like
across the
planking
floor
the whole time.
Yeah. He did it first where he wasn't picking his legs up. And then now he's doing it where his one toe kept getting a blister because he was dragging it across the floor. But now he's doing this thing. So is that okay that he's not doing what is quote unquote the certain milestone?
But in the walker, let me interject. In the walker, he is a speed demon. He is a Olympic track athlete in that walker.
But he's not, I'm going to interrupt my own question. He's not super interested in walking. He stands and he maneuvers himself from place to place and he does what he needs to as long as he has something to hold on to.
Right.
With Sienna, the second she turned a year old and she wasn't walking, I was freaking out. I was like, this is a delay. I thought she would be running by now. And I was very cognizant of that. But now with him, I'm just like, whatever.
It is what it is.
He'll walk when he walks. And I don't know if that's a good, mindset or a bad mindset to have.
Yeah, I totally understand what you mean, because we want to let our kids develop at their rate, right? Mm-hmm. And we can't put them all in a box and say, oh, this is how it should be and this is how it should be. So even though I love milestones developmentally, I don't necessarily think they have to come early. But at the same time, I do value them occurring, because if you have a strong crawler, they're not going to be in a rush to walk. But at the same time, I'm in no rush to walk, because you want your child to have a strong core and strong back muscles, and they will know when they're ready. So when they're pulling themselves up, they're building their strength, right? And if you're worried about crawling, I don't know, how it would work, but you can try to play crawling games with him. And even if meaning you would get on the floor and crawl with him, you can put a little stuffy on your back or on his and go on an adventure together to bring that coordination together. And if he doesn't crawl, I might even say, and this isn't to scare anybody, but I would say, you could see a physical therapist, because crawling is that important, right?
Can you do the thing where you put the towel under their belly? Or is that not good? Do you know what I'm talking about, G?
No.
You put a little towel under their belly and kind of support their core so they can crawl.
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. To elevate them a little bit.
Yeah, just to keep his hiney up. But you said he keeps his hiney up. He's fine.
Yeah.
He's super fast with it. So what you just said actually really hit me, that you're he may have no interest in moving to walking because he's getting where he needs to go at the appropriate speed.
He's very practical.
Yes.
Very practical guy.
Honestly, it takes a lot of strength to do that bear crawl. Yeah. I know that.
I know. And to start walking, he's going to be jacked.
Right? Yeah. It's true. And he still is getting left-right brain coordination. He is. So not to worry with that. But, and it's not that they don't want to walk. It's just that their body isn't ready yet. They have to have those strong posture muscles for it to come together.
And that's, I think, the point. So he is an intelligent, brilliant young boy, even though he's not walking yet. Those two aren't, it's not one, it's not mutually exclusive. Like, it doesn't have to be both things. He's smart. He's chilling. He's on his own timeline. I think that's the biggest message there.
Yeah. Well, ideally, we want our kids to have that extreme free movement, to be strong in their bodies, strong core. It's a layering effect. Not everything will always be perfect. My kids certainly didn't do half of what I know now. They just didn't, right? I wasn't trained and educated in that then. So no regret. It is what it is.
I'm giggling to myself a little bit over here because I remember, how there's like some of these websites, I think it was What to Expect has like the community board. And that honestly was like a Bible to me during my pregnancy time. I was on it every night, just looking at what people were saying. What are some of the things that they're coming up with? Like round ligament pain. What is this? I'm having this pain. And people are like, oh yeah, it's completely normal. Like, it was just really good to help you during that. And I looked at it probably again, all the way up through Sienna's first year. And I remember somebody saying, like, my child is so verbal. She picks up everything. She's talking in full sentences, this, that, and the other thing. Is this a sign of brilliance in later years? Or is this a sign that she's going to be gifted, or that she's going to like really take to academics and whatever? And I remember somebody writing in and being like, to be honest with you, my niece was the same way. And she was talking in paragraphs at a very young age. She's in high school now, and she's kind of a letdown. So I don't think that it really is an indication.
No.
And oh my gosh, it was too funny.
Well,
so but maybe that sets like too high of standards. Like, I think maybe if the parents take on that persona of I'm raising the next Albert Einstein, the standards or the expectations are so high.
Well, yeah. So the reason I am so passionate to share this, firstly, is not necessarily make your child a genius. It's more to let's give them all the brain connections and foundation they can get to be their best self.
I love the way you phrase that.
Yes. Like, children deserve that, right? To be their best selves, because we want to see them
You think
succeed.
about it as like all the wires aren't plugged in. Like,
exactly.
if you didn't plug your DVD player in, it's not going to work.
Exactly.
Not that people use those anymore.
Yeah. And what you said about the verbal child, that was my first little boy. He was so verbal. Oh, I just assumed, he'll do so well in school. He couldn't read. It didn't compute. I found reading and writing so easy. Why doesn't he? And he's this extremely chatterbox, and so social and all this. And I mean, now I know more about the different intelligences, and his literally would be social intelligence, and other kids can have musical intelligence or even physical body intelligence for that, athletics.
Is
whatever
that
like.
A God-given at birth thing, your intelligence type?
Well, I don't know if anyone can actually say that, but there are lots of
Or
books
is it nurtured?
It's both. It's both, I think. But I see what you're saying. I think that's almost like a personal thing. I don't know if they've ever done a study on that, but there's a book out about the 7 intelligences that they would probably say you were born that way, right? And that's the other thing I want to say too. Even though kids can have weaknesses, so my son was dyslexic, but he was so clever, right? So that's why I know, all kids are smart. They'll have strengths and weaknesses. And honestly, the true geniuses out there, like the true geniuses, oftentimes they have struggles at fitting in with others because they're in a world that they don't relate to.
Their brain just works so much differently from everyone else's.
Sure. Yeah.
But is there a way in the first 6 months, knowing what you know now, if you had another child and the powers that be told you this child will be dyslexic, I don't know. I don't know enough about dyslexia, but like, are there things you would do with that baby to alter that outcome? Or is that even a possibility?
Totally.
Okay. Yes. Wow. Okay.
Can I sit there and guarantee it? No, but from what I've learned. So, and of course my course goes all into that too, but that is the biggest thing. Free movement. So, even though we want to hold our babies a lot, we're obviously for nurturing, we don't want to let them cry. We want to holding, obviously, and having them on you and heart to heart is all important and wonderful for the brain, but so is free movement. So I would start tummy time from birth, like literally the first day, but you don't have to do it on the floor. You can do it on mommy's chest.
Okay.
But that means you have to lie down horizontally, not just on your couch with the baby on you. That's not tummy time. You're lying down, and so that they have to lift that heavy head, right? And even that movement stimulates a primitive reflex, and then side to side, primitive reflex, all of that. So lots and lots of free movement and tummy time. I might even say extreme tummy time.
What were some of the red flags that came up to you for your son? And you had mentioned that some of your children had learning difficulties. Is that the only one, or are there others? And could you talk about some of the other red flags?
Yeah. So the difficulty with that too is because now that I've actually worked with other children also, not just my own, every child's so unique and they do all develop at their own pace.
They present differently.
So, yes, even though you can look at a list for the red flags, it'll still look different in every child. And that's why often, even from grade 1 to 4, teachers know just because they're not reading in grade 1 doesn't mean they have a learning disability. They give them a few years.
Kids aren't able to read. That is an epidemic. I mean, kids cannot read.
Yeah,
it's awful.
So this would all go back to what I'm talking about, because when you are crawling, you're growing the brain connections literally through physical movement in your body. It grows brain connections from the right side of the body to the left side of the body. So right brain, left brain, and back and forth. It's kind of like the pathways we need to read and write. And so if we don't get that full body movement in the first year, potentially it could affect you. Now, lots of people would say, oh, my son, did amazing in school and they didn't even crawl. Well, of course, there's always going to be that too. But in the learning disabilities world, we do know there is a known correlation between missed crawling and struggle to read. So
that's so interesting. If that is a well-known fact, and then the CDC removes crawling from Milestones, make it make sense, Heather.
Well, it's kind of like, I don't know, a lot of different, I don't want to say it's alternative. It's not alternative. I mean, this is taught at the, Simon Fraser University, where I live in Vancouver, Canada, 25 years ago, to my colleague who specialized in learning challenges. So what am I trying to say? I don't want to say it's like alternative thinking, but not everything is mainstream. But there are some things that are really good for us that aren't mainstream. Like doctors are amazing and they do amazing things, but they're not trained in every little thing. Like if someone said, well, why isn't a doctor making sure to tell moms, please give your baby lots and lots of free movement so that their brain matures how it should? Well, I think they're just hoping and assuming that process is happening. But we are so marketed towards containers today. We put our babies in things, and that prevents movement. It's literally stealing hours and hours away from movement because we lead busy lives. And of course we have to rely on car seats. Like that's a no-brainer, And I don't want anyone to feel guilty or sad that they relied on containers too much, because I certainly did. If you have a pet in the home, sometimes you don't want your baby on the floor, but you got older kids running around.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I want to tap into the emotion for a second. When you realized that your children were experiencing these difficulties in learning in ways that you didn't expect, you said you had thought he would excel academically.
Yes.
How did that feel for you as a mom? And did you experience guilt over it?
Well, firstly, yeah. Okay. So at first, because at that stage I actually was homeschooling. So it's not that I felt guilt, but I thought, oh, there's something I'm not doing right here. Like, what does he need? What am I doing wrong? But I'm such an avid learner myself. I read every book out there, and, the internet was very limited then. There was no resources there. I still had to read books and books and books. And I read everything I could get my hands on. And most of the books said, oh, give it time. They'll learn to read when they're ready. But that's not true when there's a true brain block. They won't learn when they're ready, when they truly can't absorb it, right?
But what are signs of that?
Struggle to read. And
that's
hating to read. So how if you're learning something new and it's really hard, do you enjoy that?
Right.
No. It's like teaching me auto mechanics. I really don't care. I don't like it. Just, but anyways, that is one of the red flags, is they don't like it. But you can't assume just because your 6-year-old doesn't like reading, oh, they have dyslexia. It's just not that easy. But it is one of the signs if you've given them a year or two of reading and they still hate it. They hate it because it's hard. Honestly, most people who learn to read, if given, great instruction and a wonderful literate environment, reading should come fairly natural over the months or a year or two. But after that, if it's not coming naturally, then, and they hate it, that's definitely a red flag. So how did it make me feel? It made me feel overwhelmed. Definitely. And I also knew, because I wanted to give my kids a different experience homeschooling, because my experience in school was just, memorize and do well on the test. And then it was gone
Right.
3
Right.
weeks
You're not
later.
actually retaining the information.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I always just, I love to analyze all of that. How do kids learn? How can I give my kids the real learning experience? My point is, I knew the school wouldn't be able to help my dyslexic child. They only have limited tools and 30 kids. They don't specialize in that.
Mm-hmm.
That's how you become labeled dyslexic for the rest of your life. But if my child can't read and write, what can they do? Nothing. Like, that's crazy extreme. So I basically just went on a mission to find a way, seriously, to find a way. So I came across this book called Smart Moves by Dr. Carla Hannaford, and she's specializes in something called Brain Gym. Brain Gym has become more internationally known. It did get quite popular in the US and Canada, but then it kind of diminished. But anyways, and that is also a movement program, like boosting and stimulating the brain through movement. So that is finally what empowered my son to read at the end of grade 4, which is older. But in 3 months, which is exactly what it takes to make a serious brain change, he took off.
Wow.
And he did go on to university and got compliments on his writing. But back then it's harsh. We want our kids to have the tools to be, by successful, I just mean resilient and happy. I don't mean, extreme success. I think you know what I mean. Yeah.
The book name one more time. I'm sorry.
So it was called Smart Moves by Dr. Carla Hannaford. And it was my introduction to Brain Gym. And,
is this in any way related to Alzheimer's and dementia?
Well, I do know that some people use Brain Gym for people with dementia and Alzheimer's because through movement, how can I explain this? Their basic core move is called the cross crawl. It's a standing up crawling movement. Again, because it triggers left-right brain connection and communication. Yeah.
That's so,
I know it's a deep topic.
It's so much. It's so interesting though.
It is so fascinating, really.
On the vein of books, there's another one that you've talked about, Hold On to Your Kids, which has influenced your parenting style. And it talks about attachment parenting. So tell us about that.
Okay. That's by Dr. Gordon Neufeld. And I was having a power struggle with my daughter when she was about 6. Didn't really know why. She was just grumpy, and we'd get frustrated and she'd run down the hall or slam the door to her room. But I knew we weren't connecting, and that mattered to me. So I wanted to figure it out. Because again, with my oldest son, who was a chatterbox, well, we could just chat away. I'd be making breakfast and we're connecting. We're good, right? But every child connects differently. You're probably familiar with the 5 love languages, I'm guessing.
That's yes, we love talking about that on the show.
We need to do a whole episode on that. Yes.
Okay, great. So in a sense, that's what was happening. Easy to connect with my son, but my daughter is different and didn't realize I wasn't really connecting. All I had was this power struggle. You learn by living, right? So when I came across this book, I tried what he said. And basically his whole theory is, and when he says attachment, I mean, it's another way to me of saying connecting, right? So he said, or he'll sort of encourage kids' behavior will improve the more attached to you they feel, and they'll be able to listen better to you, and they'll even get along with their siblings better if they feel that strong attachment. So
love that.
So basically, this is what I did. Again, my son and I are chatting in the kitchen. I'm making breakfast. And I just remember this example because this was the first time I tried it with her. And she comes into the room at the doorway. And usually I would just stay there and try to talk to her, but I'm connecting from 12 feet away. And that doesn't work. She might just kind of frown and look at me, So I dropped what I was doing. I went over to her. I crouched on her level and met her eye to eye. Good morning. And then you do the higher voice. Did you have a good sleep? And then you're supposed to kind of wait for the smile or the softness, right? But that took a little longer with her, But again, that's because she connects differently than maybe my son did, because every child's unique and different.
So she might be physical touch and words or something like that.
For sure. Yeah. Definitely not the chatting like my son.
They say the firstborn son is the male version of the mother. So that would check out that you guys just chat. And you and Asher for sure. Chat.
Yeah. He's a sleeper like me.
Gianna's
so
like, I love this.
It makes sense. I'm thinking about how it applies to us as well. I think my I'm very affectionate with my daughter, but I think my husband is a little bit more so, because it's like,
Mm.
he's like running in and out and there's meetings and there's things and so he like makes sure to kind of like bear hug her and gets it all in, and then he's gone. Whereas like I'm the one that's like present, but maybe I'm not as, like you said, kind of like down on that level. And but I have
Mhm.
learned, like you said, that I think you hit on a really good point of like that connection
Mhm.
really facilitates their behavior going in like a better direction.
That's like the foundation.
Yeah, like times
Yeah.
that I want to just throw my hands up and scream at her. I'm like, I know this isn't going to go anywhere. That's letting my
Mhm.
frustration out on her doesn't actually get us to where we want to go, because that's just going to freak her out and then she's going to cry. So I have had to take some time, and we've joked, as an Italian, this is difficult on me because I want to explode and I want to start getting real loud.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
I just stop and I get down on her level and I'm like,
Mm.
why are you doing this? Like, what
Mhm.
can mommy do to help you right now?
Mhm.
So it hits what you're saying. Yeah.
For sure. And he even goes into his book that even after kids watch TV, well, not TV, maybe Netflix or their movie,
Mhm.
sometimes we have to reattach with them
Mm.
again. We can't just yell at them across the room. Okay, go do this for me, or go to your room, pick up those toys you left. They're not feeling connected again. They need to connect. But again, that connection might take with one child 30 seconds of just coming in, getting on the level,
Mhm.
the other one a little bit more. But yeah, it's a powerful tool, and this
Yeah.
doctor used it for all kinds of things in schools with teachers. He also says children will not learn unless they feel that attachment even with their teacher. So it's a
Mm.
powerful tool for learning. So he would say, if you show to your child that you don't like their teacher, then you're going to, it's not going to
Oh.
help, right? If anything, the more respect and connection you show with the teacher, the child can transfer that trust from you to the teacher. I
That's
mean,
a
it's
great
just
tip.
kind of common sense when you talk about it, but
Well,
the
people say that
opposite.
about if you don't like another parent, and then it
Mhm.
transitions or translates to the child. If you're
Sure.
like, oh, I
Yeah.
hate Mrs. Brown. It's like,
Well,
ooh.
so let's stay on that for a second. I mean, that connection was non-existent during COVID. I mean,
Mhm.
we were just seeing
Mhm.
people over Zoom like
Mhm.
we are now. And like, well, I feel connected to you. It's just different than sitting in
Mhm.
person with somebody. And has that been something that you're seeing, or one of the causes of some of the developmental delays we're seeing in the children
Mhm.
during the COVID era?
Well, that's a good question. So I had the great opportunity of talking with a woman who's PhD in Australia. And she was telling me that their studies are showing these kids are delayed from COVID, like you
Mhm.
just said. And she is highly concerned, whereas the government's more like, well, let's just give it a wait and see a few years. But she
Mhm.
would rather take action now. And I should
Mhm,
also
mhm.
add, the reason I was talking to her is she's also specializes in children's development and neurodevelopment and the primitive reflexes. And she is a consultant for a chain out there. And the reason I'm getting to this is I was going to say earlier when we talked about this, and I said, oh, you can't find this on YouTube. Well, you can find this in their little franchise in Australia called Jimbaroo, Kindiroo, because they are all about movement grows the brain. And from 6 months old and encouraging those crawling stages and on and on and on. But they've been doing this for 30 years. And it was developed by a woman similar to me who, working with children with learning disabilities, saw that some of these children still had these reflexes active and they shouldn't have been. They should have disappeared when they were babies. She saw the need. So she opened, a play group in a sense, but with the mission of developing these
Mhm.
children's brains through movement. And then it just grew and grew and grew. So that's been going on there. And they can even boast that now pediatricians recommend their program. And they've
Whoa.
had 5 graduates, like boys, go on to play FIFA soccer. So
Wow.
So it's
yeah,
called Kindaroo or
or
Jimbaroo?
Jimbaroo, Kindiroo, like the franchise goes by both names. Yeah.
Okay.
So
And you can access it online from the USA.
no, you can't. You have to live in Australia.
Oh.
Well,
Mhm.
guess we're
What?
packing up.
So
guess
either
we're
you open a franchise,
Well,
I
no,
would
heading
that's why we
across the
need
pond.
Heather's. That's why we need Heather's course
Yes.
for the baby.
available
Yeah.
on time, on demand.
Yes.
You need to
yes.
come up with one for adults, is what you need to do.
Well, yeah.
I would do it.
Listen,
I have a
there-
question though
yeah.
about you
There's so
and
much-
this doctor that you were talking to in Australia.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on screen time? Because you touched on that you have to basically deprogram your child and reconnect with them. You have to do a hard reset after they put their tablet down if you can wrestle it out of their cold,
you see
dead
how hard it
fingers.
is just for us as adults sometimes. And it's like now we're sometimes, I mean,
well, we do it at bedtime.
Fully developed. I mean, how is this little brain supposed to hang on to that?
I know. And it's so enticing. Honestly, screen time was just one of the biggest battles as the kids got older. And I didn't want it to be a battle, but it's a battle because especially like hopefully for you guys, it'll be different because hopefully you'll have friends and family on the same page. But when you don't have other friends and family on the same page, especially because we, I guess my son was 6 when we got a computer in the house, and that's when it became normal for everyone. So it's 21 years ago, I guess. So what I'm talking about is the advent of the internet and letting your child play at someone's house and you don't know what they're watching on the computer and they're only 8 years old.
Yeah.
That was really scary. And there was, obviously one bad incident and I was like horrified. After that, I felt like I can't let him play inside. Like the kids on the street. I cannot let my son play inside because I don't know if they're even being parented when they're playing. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
So that changed everything. So that's one topic. But the screen time in the home, I once heard this and I love this. Obviously, a little bit of screen time and fun movies, it's fine. It's not hurting the child, right? But what hurts the child is if it steals hours and hours away from them interacting with their environment and friends and family or even play, because we know play.
What is it replacing?
The brain. So it can steal hours away from that. And, you want to give your child as much sort of creative time or play time because that is how they learn. And that is their natural way of being and using their imagination.
Well, for you, I mean, you're kind of the first victim here as a homeschool mom. You never got, let's call it what people call it, a break. I mean, your kids didn't go off on the bus and you didn't get 8 hours to clean up the house and tidy up the house and get stuff for dinner and run your errands.
So basically I saved it for the end of the day if they got, whether it was an hour a day or 2 hours a day. And then it was a treat for them and for me. I also learned, oh my gosh, if I started the day with even half an hour of screen, forget it.
It was hard to
They
control
were off the rails.
There's no way I could get them to focus on reading or writing. They just, they're gone. And isn't that weird that it can do that? You know?
That quickly.
I
don't know if this is a no question, but for the times where it's necessary, if it's just like a half hour that you need to put it on and you're trying to get something done.
Or you're traveling or
yes.
Are there programs that you say, okay, if you're going to do it, these are the safer ones to go to?
Of course. Let's be realistic. Of course, on some of those homeschool days, I was putting on stuff. So sure, you're going to compromise and think, I'll put on something really educational, like about animals and kids.
Oh, they hate National Geographic. My son hates National Geographic. I'm like, but it's turtles. He's like, no, I want police cars. So I feel like I put on police chases and he loves it.
So Jack is now watching Law and Order.
He's basically. Yeah, he wants police chases. Yeah. And that's to Gianna's point. It's like, what is stimulating? What's not? He likes to watch Monster Jam. It's trucks going around in a circle. He likes to watch police cars driving down the street. Yeah. I don't think that's stimulating. I don't think that he's not like drooling with his mouth open and not able to function. But you answer the question because you're the expert.
Well, and honestly, obviously your son is drawn. Think about it. Vehicles, motion, movement, like his brain is attracted to that. And that's okay.
That's what he always says.
We joke, but my son has picked his gender for sure. Like he's so boy, it is insane.
Right. I know. I used to think that too. I was so strict with play guns, with my first son. By the time I had my twin boys, well, forget it because they'll make a stick a gun,
Yeah.
Anyways.
And then they'll beat each other with it. Yeah.
Right. They'll find it anywhere if they really want it.
You kind of can't, you can restrict it, but they're going to use their imagination anyway. And then what we want to honor our children. Anyways. So with the vehicles and everything, no, that's him. He's drawn to that. And I really believe in embracing children's strengths and interests, not necessarily with the screen time, but,
So if we're trying to get more movement into a child's day, what are some recommendations that you could give to parents for how they can incorporate that into their schedule and kind of hit on various age points?
Yeah, because I'm sure people say, go outside and play. I don't want to.
Yeah. Oh, I know. So obviously, when you have time, park, meaning go to the playground if there's a place for them to move their full body. But if you can't, kids love to make forts. Like, again, if you can let go with one room in your house where you do a fort or a tunnel or the climbing or the jumping or the bouncing, just, you have to be almost creative if you can find those areas to get that physicality. I mean, some parents will even put stuff in their house to help their kids hang or climb. I mean, I couldn't do that, but definitely we did forts.
You have American Ninja Warrior parents with like converting garages.
It's true.
One thing that you just reminded me of, because you touched on it quickly, was love languages.
Yes.
And I've seen so much on Instagram. Gianna and I talk about this all the time, that there's so much information. This is going to be the
love language podcast. I mean, it's woven into almost every topic we have here. It's so
I'll never forget the day I made my husband, then boyfriend, take the test. He's like, "This is stupid." I was like, well, your quality time and physical touch. So you're basically a caveman, which I knew. So, it's like that kind of stuff. It checks out. But going with love language, I see all the time on the viral Instagram reels, all all babies' love languages, it's playtime. They want you to play with them. And I see that all the time. And it always, like, when I'm like, oh, Jack, like here, go play with this. I'm like, no, get your butt on the floor and play with him. So how much of that goes into those connections or that nervous system or the neurological development?
Yes. Well, I think it's huge. I don't actually know if there's science or research on that, but let's think about it for a second. So even in Dr. Neufeld's attachment book, if you can give a child that 10 to 20 minutes of quality time, and quality time with a child will be meeting them at their level and playing in their world, not them joining your world. So, and it usually means,
mommy has to make dinner. Do you want to help me? The kid doesn't like to cook. No, I don't want to help you.
No.
Yeah.
And it could be just, water play. It could be whether it's their little dolls or Legos or whatever pretend play they're doing, or blocks, building the tower if they're two, so that's that sort of sunshine attachment time. And so, of course, it's building brain connections and feelings of love and safety. And so on so many levels, it's amazing, but it's hard, right? We're tired. It's hard to give that quality time. So I would actually, in a way, think, even if you were doing something a couple of times a week, I don't even know if daily is realistic with everything moms have to do. That's difficult. And looking back, I was thinking about this morning, knowing we were going to probably talk about this. If I was to do something different now, I think I would take my kids out. I don't know if once a week, that would not be realistic, but let's say once a month, where it was their 1 hour of sunshine one-on-one. Because, as soon as you get more than one child.
Oh, take each child out on like a date.
One-on-one. Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
And try to fill their love language if you could. So, because
we just started trying to do that. I mean, I know that my kids are still super young. I mean, 3 and 1, but we kind of inadvertently started to do it, where I would take Sienna to this one activity that Asher was too young for. So then that would become Mark's time with Asher. And the first time I was like, wow, that was actually really great to just be with her one-on-one, because I do feel that she gravitates towards my husband a lot more lately, as I've vented on this show before. So when removing him from the scenario, I was like, oh, she doesn't hate me. She just
by eliminating the threat.
Him, right. By destroying the threat. Yeah.
He's like the Death Star. Oh my God.
Yeah. So I did feel way more connected with her. And then I was like, oh my God, I want to do that again next week. And
so it's just your special sacred time of the baby has to eat. Oh, I have to change the baby. Oh, we have to get the No, it's like all on you. So it is selfish time, but it's good.
I'm sitting here thinking about so much of this, and I don't know if this is going to be frowned upon that I'm saying it, but we say what people really think here on this show. It's like working out. I am not the person. I know there are people that bounce out of bed at 5 a.m. and they go to their workout, that class, and they go to their run, they do whatever I am not that person. I dread it. I don't want to do it. But I have never once at the end of a workout said, that was miserable. I'm so mad that I did that.
Right.
You're always so happy. You always feel better. You have a hit of endorphins. And that's what it is, getting on your child's level, going into their world for a minute. Of course, your head is swirling with the 7,000 other things that you have to do as a mom and a parent. But when you push it all away and you spend that time with your child, I've never walked away and said, I wish I didn't take that hour to just read and play with her on my hands and knees.
I know. And as your kids get older, you'll probably see even more and more positive consequences, because then their cup is full. They'll get along with their brother or sister better. Right. And vice versa. And then it'll just build, because their cup is full too. And when you have that group dynamic, and I was an only child, so I don't know what that was like.
Me too. Oh, we're a
Right?
dying breed. It's nice to find another one. Yes.
No. So having 4, it's so easy to do the group thing, or even just split them off in 2 and 2. But to actually do the 1-to-1, especially because they are so unique, then you're really being with their person now. You know, when they're
And you're
5
telling
and
them
under,
you matter.
Right.
You matter to
Yes.
us. Like, yes, you as a pack, but you as a person
Are an individual. You're not just like the kids, you know, it's individualized.
Yeah. And so it's
Heather, that's so great. I love that.
I know.
Like that 1 hour of sunshine.
I feel like the biggest takeaways for me so far are obviously free movement, the quality time, the 1 hour of sunshine. I love that. But what are other things? Because you talk about these developmental or learning issues that present with kids when they're younger. So what are other things that you can do to help improve that outcome?
Good question. So obviously reading to your child is, I think, huge, because it not only helps when they're little with language development, and maybe you guys already know all that anyways, but I always love to read aloud. But maybe that's because my dad read aloud to me when I was young. In fact, he made me read aloud to him up until I was 12 years old. Even when we'd go camping, we both read aloud to each other. But anyways, so reading really develops language, even if they're just listening. And another great thing to do, just to get the verbal stuff going on, especially if your child isn't the chatterbox, the quieter child, you can say, tell me about what you read, or what is that story about? And so for them to use their thoughts about remembering what you just read or talked about, or even the movie they watched, tell daddy about the movie we watched today. It gets them processing. So just asking kids to think and retell things, it might sound so basic, but it's a great way to get children thinking and kind of indirectly analyzing. It's like the foundation, you know.
And it's practicing that social aspect as well. So when you what did you call it before? Not the languages, but the education or the
7 intelligences.
The intelligences.
Yes.
So that really helps them hone in on that social.
Well, it's like presenting ideas, grouping together facts. You know, it's definitely the basis of critical thinking or public speaking or whatever you say about that. Now, so for someone like me who has a chatterbox son,
a squirrel,
what are where do you get complacent, or where do you get comfortable, or where do you get lazy? And then, like you said, Gianna, you saw in What to Expect, the lady's like, my niece chatted away and now she stinks in high school. But I mean, that's harsh, but do you know what I mean? Like, how can you get complacent, and what are things that you should still look for?
Well, I guess overall, including physical movement. So not just for babies, toddlers and children, really you probably, of course, you haven't heard of this. I'm just realizing. So the CBC here in Canada came out with a study with really negative results, basically. For children and play today, they got a big fat D. So they're failing when it comes to play. And what they're calling for and recommending is something called more risky play. But they're calling it risky play because that is the old play. Risky play is parents are they're just more protective than ever, right? Yeah. And that could be a COVID thing. It might be. Right. Kids are more cautious than ever, holding back more than ever. Now, of course, depending on your physical dynamic or athletes in your family, your kids may not have that. I don't know. Right.
Both of our husbands are very athletic. So it's,
So, but children learn through movement. And when I had young children, I didn't know what that meant. I would hear, the preschool say, children learn through movement. Well, what does that kind of mean?
I just my kid can walk. They can reach for things.
Yeah, are they walking around the class? Yeah. Does that help them move? But it's strange to think when your child is actually doing something challenging, say they're really little and they're walking up the steep stairs for the slide or something. When they're balancing their body and coordinating their body, they're learning so many things for their brain. And it sounds so basic, but it is creating a foundation for learning and building brain connections. So physical movement really does lead to brain learning. So you hear about in these European countries, I don't remember which one it was, probably something Denmark or Finland, where they really
somewhere where everything is just perfect.
Those smarter ones over there.
Yeah, they have tulips everywhere and clean air and free healthcare.
They've got these massive, I shouldn't say massive, to me they're massive, but large playgrounds that are meant for risky play with logs, and they can build a bonfire, and they can, risky play, like push themselves a little with freedom. So,
oh yeah, we
movement
all used to have to get like tetanus shots when we were little. We had like all rusted metal and
Right.
yeah, I mean, come on.
I know.
Oh my gosh, I remember our playground was just like a set of bars at varying heights that we all learned how
We
to
had
do like
a
front flips
dome.
and back flips on. And
We
now
had like a
Exactly.
20-foot dome that you
Yeah.
could climb
I
up.
remember those.
Yeah. Like broken ankle central. But I mean,
Yep.
I would never go make it to the top. I was too scared. But that's okay. That's how
And
I live.
well,
where
that
I
explains a lot. I'm just kidding. You didn't get that movement. We're
didn't.
seeing it now.
But even like something as simple as what I'm thinking of at the playground, don't plop your kid's butt on the slide, make them walk up to the slide. I think that is like a
Yes.
very
Oh my gosh.
simple.
That is so key. And that was how I parented my first child. I was this protective mama, right? And he wasn't naturally physically aggressive or confident, physically confident to just go up that slide, because some little ones are, right?
Yeah.
So it was so easy for me to protect him because he didn't care. It's not like he tried to fight back.
Right.
Like, no, mom, let me do it.
Mm-hmm.
So I know that I was way too protective. And until I started reading about how moms can do that and prevent learning. So here's another classic thing. And this is I don't know if you're familiar at all with Montessori, the Montessori method.
But there's so many, I think there's some that are true Montessori, some that aren't. And there's so much conflicting. Oh,
Right.
it's bad. Oh, it's good.
Okay.
I don't know. There's a lot
yes.
of conflicting. Gianna, you know that people are like, it's terrible, but then it's great.
Yep.
So the summary would be, she was really all about allowing the child, empowering them to do for themselves from a very young age. So I remember the example I read in a book about, they were all going to a picnic, and you've got the 1.5-year-old toddling, and he wants to help carry this huge loaf of bread. And so he's carrying it in front of him. And classic scenario, he's struggling and wobbling. What does a mom do? Come and help him and take it away. So she would say, let him struggle, let him, maybe fall and drop it and pick it up again and bring it to the table, because that also builds self-esteem. When children do hard things, even though you don't think of that as a hard thing, but you just said it, don't plop your kids on the slide, let them crawl up, let them struggle. But I mean, stand there and protect them, but let them struggle, let it be hard.
Let them know you're there for support.
Right.
Sure.
Don't
yeah.
abandon them, but let them know that they have the skills to do it themselves.
So we are literally stealing learning from our children when we do that. And I totally did, but too, like not knowing. So allowing for that. And it is the slower way, right? I liked being places on time. Like, I'm putting my kids' shoes on because we're in a rush. I don't want to be late.
Yeah. The other thing I just thought of are like forks and spoons for kids while they're eating. It's so easy for them to eat with their hands. And Jack would like gag himself with a spoon, but now he's really good at it. Now he's really good with his fork. But that's kind of something like, I won't feed my child. Like, there are people that will hand feed their 2-year-old. And I'm like, you're a big guy. You can feed yourself.
Yeah.
Like, and that I feel like sometimes I'm like, that makes me feel cold. Or he says, hold you, when he wants me to pick him up. So he said, hold you. And I said, you're a big guy. You can walk. But then I'm like, am I mean? Someday I'm not going to pick him up. Someday it will be the last day I ever pick him up.
See, we're just too aware, and we're trying to check all the boxes. But I agree with you. You're empowering your son. And that is how he's going to feel like, I can do this. For self-esteem, we need to feel we're capable. We need to feel we're valued, and that we have a sense of self-respect. And we can only get that when people respect us.
This has been great. I love all the little tidbits you've given us today. There's so much that it's like, it's all things that are kind of swirling around in our head and in our lives as moms anyway. And then you just kind of helped us nail them down in the appropriate spot. You have an online course. I'm sure that would be super helpful to our listeners. Can you let us know where they can find that and more information about you?
Sure. So my website is babiesbestbrain.com, but mainly moms find me on Instagram at babiesbestbrain. Yeah, exactly. So, I have an online course for better if you take it when you're pregnant, so that you can start the first day of birth.
How long does it take and how much does it cost?
It's $167 American, and you can use it. You'll have it indefinitely. You can use it for all your kids. So,
Oh, nice.
Well, how long does it take to read, I guess, or how many pages?
well,
Or
the first educational component, if you did 10 minutes a day, you'd be done in 2 weeks easy. But if
Oh.
you have 3 days, you can just power through.
okay, amazing. Do it at
Yeah,
night before
and-
bed.
Yeah. And then there's demo videos that you can do with your baby. So,
I
Nice.
love that.
yeah.
One
Wonderful.
more question I have, and it just popped into my mind. What about tantrums?
Mm.
Or when your baby is just not
Yeah, what
consolable?
movement can you do to stop them?
Because no, like I'm thinking of
Yeah.
I'm thinking of Gianna. You said like Sienna had a tantrum once, and it's like, what
Mhm.
do I do? And is
Yes.
that intelligence? What is it called? Learning it or intelligence type? We keep
Right,
forgetting what
right.
this is. Is that
Well-
intelligence type focus, or is that like
Yeah,
kind of
that's a good
even
question.
playing field?
I wouldn't say I'm an expert on tantrums, but I do have an opinion as a mom with 4 and
Yes.
trying to mom intentionally for the best of my child.
You qualify.
Right.
My experience is that often tantrums are when your child's overtired and now their emotions are getting out of control. So it's an emotional outburst, right? And we've all
Mhm.
been there. And some kids are more sensitive to that than others. But if it's an ongoing thing, then it might be a behavior issue as opposed to I'm overtired, I'm overstimulated, and I can't even control what I feel. But if that happens a lot, you want to ask yourself, am I rewarding the behavior? But if you can, say, okay, no, I'm not rewarding the behavior, then yeah, you want to find out what is the need there, because often it comes from that intense frustration, right? Intense frustration.
Right.
But it can also be developmental and they will
Mhm.
outgrow it. So the question is, is it happening consistently? Is this a problem? If it's not, then yeah, it's probably just other factors. So
Okay,
yeah,
that's helpful.
I don't know if it's really related to intelligence so much as
Okay.
much as
You're being beckoned by one of your 4.
Yeah.
But one thing I wanted to mention though too is if they're, if anyone's listening about children who they think their children are struggling or might have learning challenges or learning disabilities, I would recommend the book called Disconnected Kids by Dr. Robert
Ooh.
Melillo. Yeah.
Okay.
And it
Okay.
has tools in there. If you're motivated to give your child some remedies, there's lots of helpful things in there. Or obviously you can look him up and he has other resources and brain balance centers that you can take your child to. So
Great. Thanks for
I
that and all
love
the other
it.
book recommendations you
Yeah, we
have
have
today
3 books
too.
now.
Yeah. We'll put them all in the show notes for our listeners. Heather, thank you so much for being here and helping us be a little bit more connected to our kids and to ourselves and just giving us the confidence. So really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
that was great. Thank you.